Hey everyone, it's Greg with Spotted Tongue Woodworking, and in this video, I'm going to build some end tables. And I'm not just going to build some end tables, I am going to replace the very first end tables that I made for us with a new set of end tables that I could have purchased for only $150 off of Wayfair. However, I'm going to build them entirely out of white oak, spend entirely too long doing it, and be very, very happy with the results at the end. As with all homemade hardwood furniture projects, we start with the rough lumber. We're going to cut to length, cut to width, and we're going to joint one side and then plane the other side. Jointing one side makes it flat, planing the other side makes the other side parallel, and there you will get your surface lumber that can be turned into the specific size parts. All of this white oak is a collection of leftover pieces from projects that I've had over the past few years. I've made a couple white oak tables, a set of white oak chairs, some white oak cabinets, so we had a lot of white oak left over, which is perfect for when I need to do a project cheaply. And by cheaply, I mean my wife wants new end tables, I want to make her new end tables, and there is no budget. And when I say there is no budget, I just mean the budget is however much time I'm willing to spend on them. So we are going to start with making the tabletops for these end tables. They're going to be two sets, so 4 total end tables total. And what we're going to do is, for gluing these tops up to make the tabletop blanks, we're going to do an A side and a B side along the edges. So you rip one side, that's your A side, you flip it over, and you do a B side, which is a complementary angle to the A side. Even if it's 89.9 and 90.1 angles, that allows the glue up to be perfectly flat when you bring it together, and it helps with alignment when you pull it out of the clamp. It's just a little technique that really helps with getting these tabletops. It works especially well for larger glue ups, bigger than these 16-inch end tables, like a full 4-foot or 54-inch round table. Having the complementary angles like that really helps things out. So we have the tabletops glued up. There was some glue drippage that I was not able to scrape off overnight, so I take a quick hand plane, get the bulk of it off, and then we're going to run these blanks through the drum sander just to get them flat on both sides. I do it with the drum sander rather than the planer because the planer will take too much material off, and with the knives not being super sharp, I'm going to be left with a lot of planer marks or tear out. So we'll just use a little bit of super glue and accelerator to fill in the voids, and we'll square the tabletop up on the table saw using the miter gauge. So square it up, and we're going to cut these notches out for the legs. And I got a lot of responses on Facebook and Instagram, on YouTube and all that, about how I was going to have massive kickback. Well, you heard it. You did have a little bit of kickback, but kickback is only bad if you don't plan for it and if you don't expect it. If you know it's going to happen, it's not such a big deal, is it? Anyway, I cut the notches out, put a little undercut for a nice shadow line between the tabletop and the apron, and now we're going to go to the leg blanks. Rather than working with a true 8-quarter stock, we're going to make laminated leg blanks. I believe having a laminated leg blank, while being a little bit busier, you can try to match the grain as best you can, and what it's going to do is, I believe that they're actually going to be more stable than a solid piece, because a solid piece is just going to want to move in one direction. If you laminate two pieces together, the two pieces are going to fight. I guess you could say they fight against each other, but they'll also hold each other straighter. So it'll be all glued up, and then we're going to square these legs up, run them on the joiner, go through the planer, and from the planer we're going to cut them to the final length. Standard end table is 24 inches tall. I did make a little mistake. I was at the shop at night, and for some reason I didn't have a tape measure, and I ended up using an old tape measure line thing from 1912, and everything is 3/4 of an inch short. Wasn't too happy, but it is what it is. I wanted to have a nice large round over on the legs. I got a 1 1/4 inch round over bit from Yonico on Amazon. It turns out it doesn't fit in the router table, doesn't fit in any router that I had, so we'll just do a standard 1/2 inch radius, which actually turned out pretty nice. So we'll get the radius cut, and we will now taper the legs on the table saw. And the key for these projects, thinking I'm making 4 end tables. 4 end tables has 4 legs each, so that's 16 legs. Making sure that everything is the same, repeated the same, having the same dimensions, having the same setup, and using a miter gauge, using clamps, using stop blocks. All of that really helps with that repeatability and really helps with that consistency with the project. So I only really have to measure everything once and just do the same cut multiple times. But obviously, if you don't measure correctly that first time, you could end up cutting everything a little bit short, just like I did with those legs. So take what I say with a grain of salt and learn from my mistakes. Alright, so with the aprons on the table, so I need to have alignment with the edges of the table on the front and the sides, but then I also need to have that consistent offset from the ends of the legs themselves. So what we do is we find the center of my apron pieces, cut the dominoes into the aprons, and then put a spacer block that is the equivalent to the setback from the face of the legs to the face of the aprons, and that'll give me the reference point I need to cut the dominoes into the legs themselves. When I say I had leftover white oak lumber from multiple projects, is I do, and from multiple projects also comes from multiple suppliers. So we had white oak lumber from Alderfer up in the Selinsgrove area, we had white oak from Lafferty out in Lemoyne, and then I bought some white oak from a sawmill out in Carlisle, the Appalachian sawmill, or depends on where in the country you are, Appalachian. Yeah. Anyway, the bottom shelf for these end tables are going to be a ladder style open rack type thing. So you can see that I cut my pieces, everything is mitered frame on the bottom, and we're going to be pocket holing these slats into the frame itself. And you say, Greg, you have a domino, why didn't you use a domino? And I say, well, because I like the domino, but I also like my pocket hole machine. Again, like I said, I've do a lot of cabinetry. This year I did a lot of paint grade cabinet work, and the pocket hole machine has been one of my nicer investments. Going from that is I have no problem using pocket holes in fine furniture in the correct application, and I believe this was the correct application. In the small amount of furniture restoration that I have dabbled with, is I can't believe how many pieces of furniture are built with pocket screws. And you could say it's the survivor's bias, which again proves my point that the furniture that's left over is built with pocket holes. So get off your pocket hole high horse, use pocket holes if you want to, and use them correctly. And again, on the subject of measuring once and cutting twice, or measuring twice and cutting once, is I had the wrong dimensions for the dados in the legs and the size of the ladder rack. I was off by the magnitude of a 1/4 inch on each corner, so I was off by 1/2 inch, so I had to recut everything. After that, dry fit worked it out, and now we're doing the glue up. The glue ups were a little stressful because it was the 4 end tables. There are, it's a lot of pieces that go together. Having those clipped dog ear style things in the legs of the table was really nice. Turns out one set of those ladders was slightly slimmer than the other set, so I had to fight it to get it to go into place. But we got everything clamped up, got everything squared up, and we're going to clean as much of the glue off as we can with a wet rag, so that I don't have to worry about scraping it or sanding it or chiseling it off when everything is said and done. And we pull everything out of the clamps. 2 out of the 4 tables still had a slight wobble to them in the legs, so what I ended up doing was I left those 2 tables with a clamp, pulling the long side shorter and leaving a clamp and let the glue harden a little bit further, and that took the wobble out of the tables. Like I said, cleaning the glue up, I did use a little chisel action to get the glue up and to make sure the tabletop sat nice and flat on those aprons. And we're just going to hit everything with the sander, along the edges, around that rounded over corner. And in the bottom, there's this nice little detail. Very intentionally, I wanted a shadow gap, this whole project with shadow gap, shadow lines. Having that little detail in the ladder rack on the bottom, using a dental pick to pull that out. It's really nice for painting cabinet doors. It's also good for cleaning up any small details that you want. attaching the top with your figure 8 fasteners. Best little trick for putting screws into anything is to use paste wax. It just a little lube helps things go in a lot quicker and a lot easier. And with everything together, we're just gonna do the final little sanding details. Sanding the top, make sure the top is flush with those legs and that those legs are flush with the top. Round over those little feet right there to make sure nothing catches, so I could use a sander and use a little file. And we're going to use Rubio Monocoat for the finish. If you haven't heard of Rubio Monocoat, it is a hard wax oil finish that is easy to apply, easy to use, and is fairly durable. We're going to do a set in natural and a set in pure to really highlight that natural white oak grain. And there it is, 4 white oak end tables, handmade just in time for Christmas. And you'll see the end tables that they are replacing. Like I said, those were the first pieces of furniture that I had ever made, with a drill and a circular saw and a sanding attachment on a multi-tool. Not bad for what they were, but I am a lot happier with these new end tables. If you've made it this far to the end of the video, thanks for watching, and I want to give you my favorite fun fact about white oak is that the US Navy maintains a private white oak forest specifically for restoring the USS Constitution, because obviously the US Navy does not use white oak warships anymore. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll catch you next time.